Good morning, everyone. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about the landscape of global business services, the key challenges and opportunities, and what are some of the key pillars for global business services to stay relevant to the enterprises over the next decade. Let's quickly look at global business services landscape. We study the top 1,000 companies which we track based on their R&D and technology spend. And out of the 1,000 companies, over 100 companies had global business services. These are formal global business services organizations. These companies had set up their own centers across the nearshore centers in the US, Latin America, as well as offshore centers in countries like India, China, Philippines, and other parts of Eastern Europe. These companies also have partnership with third-party service providers who provide majority of services, global business services, and even these third-party service providers are present in these key locations. During the pandemic, we have seen how work from home became a lot easier for companies, and we expect because of that trend, more work from onshore is going to be transitioned to more nearshore locations in Latin America, as well as offshore locations, be it in India, China, and Philippines, and other locations. We analyze the global business services organizations across different verticals. Usually the GBS starts with one function, be it IT, finance, procurement, and extends to other functions over a period of time. We have seen this trend consistent across various industries, where GBS is moving from a single function center to a multi-function center. We expect this trend to continue over the next few years. GBS organizations are currently at a crossroads. There are a lot of challenges, but also some opportunities. First, let's look at some of the key challenges faced by GBS teams. First is global organizations are moving very close to the customer to provide great customer experience. But GBS, by definition, creates one order of separation from the customer with the individual teams. This makes it very hard for the individual team members working in GBS to understand the customer needs. In fact, many of the GBS teams think of their internal functions and business functions as customers. And that creates a major challenge in the organization. Second is really the complexity of the matrix structures in GBS organization. GBS teams are not structured like services teams like Accenture, nor they are deeply integrated with the corporate functions. GBS, in fact, had multi-levels of services. For example, if GBS teams have multiple global centers of excellence in different countries, the leaders of those countries have direct reporting to the functions in that location. So GBS will have a leader for a corporate function, and the individual countries will have a leader for that function. So in some level, there is a services organization created within GBS. And that creates significant amount of complexity in the matrix structure. Third is a conflict which gets created between GBS as well as corporate functions. As GBS gains maturity, the teams there want more ownership in terms of the kind of work they want to do. They want to drive some of the corporate transformation programs. But if you don't have alignment with the corporate functions and corporate priorities, it creates conflict between the corporate functions and GBS. Functions like technology and IT in many companies are not really part of GBS. And even in companies where IT and technology are part of GBS, because of digital transformation, the CIO organizations want that part of the team directly reporting into them, creating a lot of conflict between GBS and corporate functions. Fourth is really the competition with vendors and partners. Even though GBS works with a lot of third-party providers who are providing service to GBS, these third-party providers are always looking for opportunity to take over the entire GBS organization, which increases the overall revenue for the enterprise. Especially during periods of crisis like what we have seen, the economic crisis created because of COVID, many large third-party service providers are looking at carving out the global business services organization from large enterprises. Again, a key competition, you're competing with your own partners and vendors. The next is really the talent war, which is going to happen over the next 2 years. Think of a technology like AI. Our Drop platform says you need 1.2 million data scientists, data engineers over the next few years. And we have only 650,000 globally deployed in AI. There's a significant gap. and GBS organizations has to compete with some of the top global companies to be able to attract this talent. And the other way, you also look at automation reducing the number of talent working in GBS, and GBS to a large extent had a lot of manual processes. With automation coming in, the GBS organization, which measure themselves in terms of revenue as well as number of people, will get disrupted by the automation wave which is going to come in. There are also a lot of interesting opportunities for GBS organizations. The first one is GBS organizations are the single source of enterprise truth. They have capability across different organizational processes. They understand the organizational exceptions, and they are a treasure trove of data within the organization. So if a CXO wants to understand truly what is happening in the company, they have to come to the GBS organization. That's a key benefit. The second is GBS organization is a place where you can build new organizational muscle. For example, if the company is looking to experiment with blockchain, GBS organization can work with business units, understand the key business case. They can work with technology organizations to create quickly POCs and then scale it across the organization. And GBS organization also structured to tap into the external ecosystem of government, academia, service providers, and startups. They're able to bring in potentially this innovation from externally from the organization and seamlessly integrate and scale with the organizational processes. And GBS organization also, because of the structure, can lead cross-BU initiatives within the organization. For the same reason, GBS organizations can also lead digital transformation initiatives within the organization. For GBS organizations to stay relevant in the future, they need what we call as bold vision. GBS organizations has to move from focused on cost to focus on enterprise experience. When you say enterprise experience, it's customer experience, partner experience, and most importantly, employee experience. And how do you now enable enterprises to provide great experience across the three areas is going to be a key differentiator for GBS. And GBS should be the digital transformation agent for the organization. And GBS could also incubate new digital and digitally enabled services using the processes, data insights, and other capabilities which is built within GBS organizations. And GBS should also become a talent pipeline for the entire organization where both business units and corporate functions can get top talent from the GBS teams. And GBS teams can also have a potential to create what we call a zero ops enterprise. When your enterprise is competing with digital native companies, these digital native companies don't really have a lot of manual processes, and that's what makes them operate very agile. And GBS organizations can potentially enable the organization to become zero ops organizations. These are some of the key bold visions GBS team should sign up for. To enable these bold visions, there are 5 key pillars GBS organizations should focus on. The first pillar is portfolio allocation. Portfolio allocation has 2 parts. One, how do you allocate end-to-end processes? And second, what is the work which you need to do in your own subsidiaries, own captive units, or with third-party service providers? Second is transformation of your captive units to what we call as global centers of excellence. So we'll talk about it in a little bit detail as we go forward. And third dimension is really how hyper-intelligent automation is a key pillar for GBS to transform. Fourth aspect is a focus on innovation, both internal innovation as well as external innovation. And finally, it's all about leaders, and we need what we call as intrapreneurs. These are corporate entrepreneurs within the GBS organization. You need such leaders who can drive the GBS organization to the next level of maturity. Let's talk about each of this in some level of detail. First is project allocation. If you look at the last decade of GBS, the projects that have been allocated based on splitting a process by task and looking at skills from different locations. For example, if it could be in Manila for voice, it could be for back office in Bangalore. However, the key is to take end-to-end process and then assign it to a specific location or specific third-party provider. That's one key aspect. Second, and most important, is really to understand what are these core processes of the organization and what are context processes. Let's take an example of an HR process. The processes which are aligned to candidate experience, it has to be highly differentiated, especially during this war of talent. And those are really core processes which has to be kept within the organization. If there are administrative processes around HR, which could be context for the company, it's still critical, but doesn't differentiate the organization. These could be transitioned to third-party providers. So really, for both your core functions as well as corporate functions, you got to look at what is core and what is context and transition it in the right way. Second is, stop calling your internal subsidiaries as captive units. They are not captive to anyone. We call them global centers of excellence. These global centers of excellence can make a massive difference if you set them up in the right way to drive the GBS charter. And here is an example of an operating model what we have been able to establish in many of our customers. There are different aspects of the operating model for a GCOE. First is, who are the key stakeholders? The stakeholders are not just the company, but the stakeholders are your end customers, not the internal customer, the end customers, your employees, as well as the community where the GCOE is present. The second is, what are the key sponsors? You need sponsors, not just the CXO. You also need sponsors from mid-level. You also need sponsors from other parts of the external ecosystem. And we believe GCOEs need dual core. One core is looking at innovation. They're looking at ideas from internal and external. They're experimenting with the ideas. Many of these ideas could fail, but some of the ideas could potentially scale. And the other part is scale core. The scale core is really focusing on transitioning projects and processes from various global locations, taking some of the scaled ideas from the innovation core and really scaling that part within the organization. To run an effective GCOE, you need focus on governance, organization structure, and metrics. And more importantly, you need a right talent strategy to be able to attract, retain, engage, and develop high-quality talent in each of these locations. And location needs in Philippines could be different from India, and you need to localize your policies to be able to address that. And finally, you have to be integrated with the external ecosystem with the government, startups, academia, and all of that. If you have an operating model like this for your what was called captive units, it's really global centers of excellence, it really can create significant value for the GCOE. The other key pillar is automation. And we are not talking about RPA. We are really talking about what we call as hyper-intelligent automation. Hyper-intelligent automation has four key aspects. One is, how do you do use case discovery? Second is, how do you drive data transformation? Third is, how do you reimagine processes? And finally, how do you automate these processes? The first is use case discovery. You've got to use scientific methodologies, be it task mining, process mining, to understand the key processes which have the right ROI for automation. Second is looking at data transformation. How do you look at technology like OCR and other intelligent document processing technologies to look at unstructured data and convert them to structured data? Third is about process reimagination. It could be re-engineering the process, re-engineering the workflow, or other ways in which you can streamline it so that you can make it easier for automation. And finally, it's about automation. Automation, you can use the existing technology like RPA or newer technologies such as low-code platforms, and use that, and even the individual process owners and the manual data engineers can actually use some of these platforms to automate the existing processes. So a hyper-intelligent automation is going to be an extremely key lever and key pillar for the organization. To be able to use hyper-intelligent automation, it's important for GBS to create what we call as automation COEs within the organization. The automation COEs will work with the business units to understand domain and understand the use cases which needs to be automated. It works with technology to deploy, secure, and manage some of these automation processes. The automation COE itself should have a team of automation experts, be it developers and testers, it should have consulting capabilities which can work with business to understand the key use cases. You can also have a data scientist team which can work with the domain experts in GBS and look at how to use machine learning-led automation. Having an automation COE will become a very, very important differentiation for GBS organization within the large companies. And the next is having a clear focus on innovation, both internal innovation and external innovation. The organization should have what we call as a culture of innovation. A culture of innovation has several things. First, you got to have a strategy around innovation. Second, you got to have an enabling environment for engineers and individuals to come up with great ideas. Third, you need to have incentive structure to enable individuals to come up with ideas. Then you need to have a process to take these ideas through a funnel to ensure the top ideas which have the right product market fit are selected and groomed. These ideas are really fragile in the start, groomed to create significant impact. And finally, you need to have the right mentoring and coaching mechanism to take these ideas into the market. Having a structured innovation process is extremely critical. And this innovation process can not just come up with ideas for GBS to grow better, but could potentially come up with ideas which could create new business units for the company in the future. And it's not about just internal innovation, it's also about external innovation. Think of trillions of dollars which is going into the venture capitalist industries. And these venture capitalist industries are creating multiple what is called unicorns. These are billion-dollar startups across the world. And GBS is uniquely positioned because it has presence in India, in China, in Israel, and other parts of the world where they can truly tap into the startups in that location. It's very important to look at what kind of ideas are coming from these startups and how do you partner with these startups. There are several ways. You can co-innovate with the startup. You can sign a licensing and vendor agreement with the startup. You can acquire the startup through your venture arm. In some level, the startup could have great talent, but the idea might be before the time. You can potentially acquire. There are a lot of different ways in which you can tap into and bring that startup ecosystem into the organization. And a lot of this is not going to be possible unless you have great leaders. And we see there are two types of leaders within GBS teams. One is what we call as a governor. These are statesmen who are there to manage exceptions and run an organization in a steady state. And the second is intrapreneurs. So intrapreneurs are leaders who act like corporate entrepreneurs within the organization. They can come up with a vision. They can navigate the organization, communicate that effectively, convince the right stakeholders, and also execute on the vision and put what we call as a job on the line to be able to execute on this vision. You need intrapreneurs not just at the GBS leadership level, but across GBS, because GBS is all about initiative. GBS is all about transformation, change management. So you need different kind of leaders, leaders who manage organizations at steady state. And that's the fifth pillar. We talk quite a bit about what's going to happen in GBS, but a lot of questions we still don't have answers for. Here are some of the questions. First, are GBS organizations going to be transient structure? They will create permanent impact, but they're going to be in an organization only for a period of time. Will GBS organization get created during periods of change and during periods of stability get transitioned back into corporate functions? What will be the lifetime of a GBS organization? Will it be 5 years? Will it be 10 years or more? Can GBS be an enterprise asset which can be monetized by selling to a third party or to a private equity? And should GBS leaders transition on a periodic basis to corporate functions and GBS and other business units? We don't have answers to a lot of these questions, and we continue to research on some of these topics. If you're interested to participate in some of the research we are doing in GBS, or understand more about our offer on how we enable and transform existing GBS, please reach out to us. Thank you.